the staff is set for Nebraska, at least the full-time 10. And, I think it kind of solidified itself. Number one, Glenn Thomas, we talked to him Monday. We now know his contract details. He'll make $800,000 as the co-offensive coordinator.
$800,000.
So
2-year deal, right?
2-year, yeah. Standardized 2-year deal. That brings the assistant salary pool to just around $6.8 million. Matt Rule, when he took the job, was granted $7 million, so he still remains under the cap. A year ago, he was far under the cap because Bob Wager was making $315, and now Thomas will make $800,000. And then Raiola got a raise. Tony White's received a raise, and then Tony White. We learned the news this week.
Yeah,
the UCLA job moved fairly quickly, and they stayed in house with Deshaun Foster. Tony White had overtures this offseason from San Diego State, Syracuse, USC, UCLA, and it was kind of like the unicorn of jobs for Tony White. All 4 of those jobs made a lot of sense, but Nebraska's able to hold on to Tony White. They upped his pay $600,000 over the offseason.
Yeah, he had his defense was ranked number 11th nationally, so I mean he definitely earned a raise. Just to be clear, the USC job was a defensive coordinator position, not the head coaching position.
Which would have been probably similar pay to the 1.6 he's getting. Now, USC doesn't list their salaries.
The interesting thing, to me anyway, is you never know what to believe when you're reading about coaching searches. And I got to be honest, Sean, I probably didn't take this White to UCLA possibility seriously enough after hearing Matt Rule on Tuesday night on statewide radio. I mean, he talked to the UCLA AD, Martin Jarmond. Martin Jarmond is the AD, and he called Rule. That indicates a level of seriousness. And Rule had the quote that I'm sitting here in February wondering if I'm going to lose my defensive coordinator. So it got serious, obviously. I mean, I don't think Rule would say, I'm sitting here in February worried about losing my defensive coordinator if there wasn't a level of seriousness. And then when you look at who they hired, Deshaun Foster, a running backs coach with no coordinator experience whatsoever, you would say White's probably got a better resume.
I mean, Deshaun Foster made $385,000 at UCLA last year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like making $100,000 in Lincoln, Nebraska, by the way.
Right. So White's resume is probably better. That doesn't mean you don't pick coaches just straight up on comparing resumes. I know that it's a nuanced conversation. And the nuance in this case was the players made it very clear to the AD at UCLA that they wanted Deshaun Foster. The players, I think, my read is the players in this day and age have more say than than they've ever had in these coaching hires. Trent Bray wouldn't be the Oregon State head coach if the players didn't come.
Sherrone Moore, Michigan.
Sherrone Moore, exactly.
Like 5 years ago, if Jim Harbaugh left Michigan, would they have gone to Sherrone Moore? It's hard to say, but
his chances would have been less.
Now Ryan Day is an example, and it's the Ryan Day, Urban Meyer is the Tom Osborne kind of Frank Solich model, the Bob Devaney, the Tom Osborne model, where you have an established system with coaches in place. You don't want to blow that up. Alabama blew it up, and we've seen their roster blow up in the process.
Yeah.
Washington has blown it up. We've seen their roster blow up.
They can more afford it too than a place like Nebraska or UCLA.
Washington, though?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, you saw that FanDuel over-under is the same as Nebraska's.
And they played for the national championship.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, yeah, I guess Alabama's more so, Michigan's more so than Washington's. But a place like UCLA, if you blow that roster up, it's going to be really difficult because they don't have NIL money. Their NIL war chest is less than $1 million. It's it's 6 figures.
According to a report from The Athletic.
Yeah. According to The Athletic. So how do you build a roster?
You can't.
Quick. How do you build a roster quick?
I mean, to put that in perspective, like Stefan Wynn, when Nebraska brought him in, I'm fairly confident that was a 6-figure roster acquisition.
Yeah. And that was a reserve defensive line.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So imagine having to find 20 players of that caliber.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right now UCLA couldn't do it. So if you're Martin Jarmond, their AD, you're looking at the situation saying, I don't think we literally can't afford to do that. We got to hire the guy. We got to probably hire the guy the players want.
And I think now going forward, it's so important for every team in college football to make sure there's another guy on their staff.
Yeah.
That's capable.
Good point,
Like
Sean.
Tony White, not saying Matt Rule's leaving Nebraska, but if Matt Rule, something ever happened and Penn State opened and you went to Penn State or something like that. I mean, that would, you know, he played at
great
Penn
point.
State.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have a guy right now in Tony White.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
You better have a guy ready.
I mean, there's a guy in Lawrence, Kansas that makes sense. I mean, but again, like with the way rosters blow up quickly in the NIL collect, it's important that your collective is on the same page with everybody too. Because they control the paychecks.
God, it's interesting when you get to talking about it. It's really interesting. The NIL piece is critical. And what you said is critical too. You better have a guy in the staff that can do it, you know. And with Deshaun Foster, you don't know. You don't know if he can't, but you sure don't know if he can. He's never done it.
Like Washington chose not to give the job to Will Grubb. And then Grubb went to Tuscaloosa
to be offensive coordinator
and left already to go back to Seattle.
Okay.
To be the Seahawks OC.
Yeah.
The same job that Chip Kelly looked at. Now Chip Kelly's at Ohio State.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it?
Georgia State, by the way, lost their head coach to be a Power 5 assistant. So you're seeing that more and more now. I mean, North Dakota State's head coach is now not a coordinator, an assistant at USC. You're seeing head coaches at high group of 5 and FCS jobs leaving that job to be a Power 5 assistant, not even a coordinator.
Well, because there's more money.
I mean, when you can make $800,000 as a quarterbacks coach, non-play calling quarterbacks coach. I mean,
it's probably pretty appealing, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, Sean.
And then a couple roster things. One roster thing. Corey Collier moved on this week, and my understanding he's not been on the roster for over a week now, maybe 9 days. 10
Corey
days.
Collier. There's a name.
And I think he's not necessarily the story to me. It's just more. This is going to happen more and more. When you kind of bring in these players on a flyer and don't have a great relationship with them, some are going to work out and some are not.
Right. He was, he got kind of close. Now, if you look at Collier's career, he played 2 years at Florida. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he played 2 years at Florida and never
redshirted in 1 year.
Yeah, never really made a dent. And then he came here and never made a tackle. Got in 5 games. Never made a stop.
He started the spring game. That always got my attention.
It did.
Like when they technically had a 1 defense, he started the spring game. But I'll tell you 3 things happened. Deshaun Singleton.
That happened.
He got going.
That happened.
Omar Brown.
That happened.
Took a step forward. And then Tommy Hill, obviously, on the back end, kind of helped move things around. Then Marquise Buford came back.
Yeah. 4 things. So, yeah, you're right.
I mean, all those pieces kind of improved, and he wasn't able to beat those guys out. He's a double transfer. This is not one of those, since Matt Rule signed him, I don't think technically Matt Rule can offer him the retirement package. So he's not in the portal yet.
So he moves on.
He moves on. But I think you're just going to see a lot of that all the time in college football now. When you kind of do a speed, when you're in a situation like Nebraska was in year 1, kind of a speed dating recruiting, some are going to work out, some aren't.
Yeah, it's kind of like this is sort of harsh, but the way the rosters change now, it's kind of like Y League basketball. It's just, let's get a group of guys together and see if we can make this work, and it changes season to season.
Corey's good looking. He runs. He's got long length. He's from Florida. He's from Miami.
Yeah. Let's face it, he could play a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, he'll find something somewhere.
I think so. Yeah.
It just didn't work out here. And I mean, they took Steve Sipple 10 defensive backs on the roster.
I know.
9 freshmen and 1 transfer, Bly Hill. So you do the math. That's a lot. I mean, they essentially signed a basketball team in the secondary, 10 players.
Yeah. And some of those guys can move, but and then
they
also
probably would be a good basketball team too.
Yeah. The only other, when we're talking about nuts and bolts, Rule was on radio on Tuesday, and he talked about the 11 a.m. kickoff for the spring game and how that'll be a Husker day for athletics, I guess, where the spring game is at 11 a.m. and you have softball and baseball. He talked about taking recruits to the softball and baseball and all that. He seemed enthusiastic about it.
It was his call.
Yeah. I'm sure he had to sign off on it. So there you go. Well, that'll be a quick in and out for us, but it'll be a big recruiting day for
sure.